Walt Disney's credo for success was dream, believe, dare, do. When values are clear, decisions are easy. Disney's customer service has become legendary. Dare to make a difference, and then just do it. In September of 1966, just 10 months after he announced his plans for the building of Walt Disney World in Orlando, Walt was admitted to the hospital for what he thought was going to be some routine back surgery. However, while he was there, he was diagnosed with terminal lung cancer. He was readmitted to the hospital later on that year, shortly after Thanksgiving, and most of his colleagues and fellow workers thought he was going back to the hospital for some follow-up surgery on his back. Only his closest colleagues and family members knew the severity of his illness. Little did his co-workers know that Walt would never return to his beloved studios and theme park. As Walt grew weaker those early days in December and could no longer sit up in his hospital bed, he had his assistant pin the plans to Walt Disney World above his bed so that he could continue to dream and dictate his thoughts for this park. On the morning of December 15th, 1966, Walt passed on to the next dimension. And the family members and the Disney executives didn't want to make the announcement in the morning because they didn't want to wreck the festive atmosphere at Disneyland. So they made it at the end of the day. And one of the executives I've spoken to wanted to see the reaction of the crowd when the announcement of Walt's passing was made. And he said he had been at Disneyland and watching the crowds leave hundreds of times before, and they'd always be laughing and joking and talking about their experiences. He said, but this time the strangest thing happened. Everyone, mothers, fathers, children of all ages, people from all over the nation, all over the world, were leaving in dead silence as if they just heard the passing of their favorite uncle. So let's fast forward the clock now about 30 years in the future, and I'm at Walt Disney World with a group of executives studying their practices. And one of the executives turns to me and says, Bill, it's a shame that Walt Disney didn't live to see this beautiful park completed. And I thought for a moment, and I said, you know, George, he did see it. That's why it's here. Walt Disney was a dreamer, a visionary, even during his last seconds here on earth. But more importantly, he was a communicator. He could articulate his vision to all. There are really 6 reasons why we use Disney as a model. First is consistent direction. Since 1928, they've had the same direction to provide the finest in family entertainment. Secondly is mutual respect and trust. Walt created that value way back in the 20s and 30s. And it's continued on, even though it was challenged in the late 1990s and early 2000s by Michael Eisner. But just like one of Disney's animated feature films, good triumphed over evil. They have extraordinarily low turnover rates. People always ask me, you know, what's the pixie dust, Bill? How does Disney paint those smiles on everybody? You know, how come they're always so pleasant? Well, it boils down to really 3 things. Number 1 is hiring. They hire people that like people. Sounds pretty easy, doesn't it? But they tell me that they can tell but by the time a person is about 15 years old, whether or not that person is a people person, enjoys serving others. And they tell me no matter how much training you give a person, if they're not a people person internally, they're never going to be a people person at 21 or 30 or 40 or 60. And they go through personality tests and they go through extensive amounts of interviewing, not only with HR, but with people that are going to be their co-workers as well. And they all have input into the new hire. Secondly, their vision to provide the finest in family entertainment. That is drilled into new recruits from their very first day on the job, and we'll be talking about their orientation process as well. So dream, some of your actions. communicate that dream to all and be persistent and consistent. And when I say communicate it, don't just post it up, on the back of your business cards or on your walls of your agencies or whatever. Take every opportunity to tell your story. Tell your story at all your meetings, all your outings, your staff meetings. And be persistent and consistent. Once you're not, you're dead in the water. I'd like to conclude with, before we open it up to some questions, an example that takes us all the way back to 1955, prior to the opening of Disneyland. And there was a little boy who was about 10 or 12 years old that worked in the mailroom for the Disney organization. And whenever there was a special delivery package or letter for Walt Disney, he would make sure that it was his job to deliver it. And one day they were planning the opening of the park in a few days, and this boy comes in and he interrupts the meeting and he says, "I have a confession to make." And Walt said, "Well, what's that?" He says, "I don't want to work in the mailroom. I want to be Tom Sawyer. And you're casting for the role of Tom Sawyer on Tom Sawyer's Island tomorrow. And I wish you would consider me for the role." And Walt Disney looks at the little boy, looks at his vice president of casting. He says, "The little boy has red hair and freckles. He looks a little bit like Tom Sawyer. What do you think?" And the vice president of casting, taking the signal from his leader, says, "Yeah, let's hire him." So they hired the little boy as Tom Sawyer. The park opens. It's been open for a few days. Vice president of casting comes barging into Disney's office. He says, "That Tom Sawyer you hired? We have to fire him." And Walt said, "Well, why? What has he done?" And the vice president of casting said, "Well, that little boy has literally become Tom Sawyer." And Walt said, "Well, what's wrong with that? Isn't that why we hired him?" And the vice president explained. He said, "Walt, that little boy has to prove to all the other little kids coming on the island that he's the toughest one around. He's a little bully. He's picking a fight with all your guests as they're coming on the island. We got to get rid of this kid." And Walt got visually upset, which is out of character for him, and told everyone to leave his office but the vice president of casting, closed his doors, and he said to him, "You don't understand what we're trying to do here." And the vice president said, "No, apparently not." He said, "That little boy is being the best Tom Sawyer he knows how to be. Now it's your job to make him the best Tom Sawyer for Disney." That story was lost for over 30 years and was told at the little redheaded boy's 30-year recognition dinner with the Disney organization by the vice president of casting who came out of retirement to honor his 30 years of service. How close they came to losing a valued employee of over 30 years when it seems so easy but yet so hard. All we have to do is train the daylights out of our people, give them the tools to succeed, let them know what's expected of them, and then get out of their way and let them become the best Tom Sawyer, receptionist, social worker they know how to be. Make your dreams come true. Believe in yourself, believe in your teams. Dare to make a difference, and then just do it.